At exactly 3:17 a.m., Emily woke up and realized something terrifying. She wasn't the one who had opened her eyes. For a few seconds, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even understand what felt wrong. Her body was already sitting upright on the bed, her hands resting calmly on her lap, as if she had been awake for a long time, yet her mind had only just arrived. The room was silent, unnaturally silent. 6 beds, 6 girls, but no sound of breathing, no shifting blankets, no restless movement. And then she saw it. Every girl in the room was sitting exactly like her, upright, still, awake. None of them looked at each other. All of them were staring at the door. And then the bell rang. It wasn't loud, but it was wrong. The kind of sound that seemed to stretch through the air instead of echo, like metal scraping against something hollow and endless. Emily felt it inside her chest more than she heard it. Her fingers twitched, but she still couldn't control them. The bell rang again, closer this time, and without a single word, every girl in the room stood up at the exact same moment. Emily tried to scream, but no sound came out. 3 weeks earlier, everything had felt normal, or at least normal enough to ignore the unease creeping quietly beneath the surface. St. Mary's Catholic boarding school stood isolated on a hill, surrounded by dense forests and rusted iron gates that rarely opened, the kind of place parents trusted because of its discipline and silence. But from the moment Emily arrived, something felt wrong in a way she couldn't explain. The building seemed too dark for its own age, the walls absorbing light instead of reflecting it, the tall windows appearing more like empty eyes than glass. The nuns welcomed her with gentle smiles that felt practiced rather than warm, their voices calm but distant, and their eyes lingered on her just a moment longer than necessary, as if they were observing something beneath her surface rather than simply greeting a new student. The other girls were even more unsettling. They weren't rude or unkind, just strangely identical in behavior. They spoke in whispers, walked with quiet precision, and rarely laughed, and when they did, it felt incomplete, like something essential was missing. It didn't feel like a school. It felt like a system designed to keep everything exactly the same. On her first night, Emily met Sophia, and for the first time, things felt almost normal. Sophia was different, restless, alert, real in a way the others were not. They whispered under their blankets, sharing small stories and quiet laughter, holding on to a sense of normalcy that seemed fragile in that place. But then Sophia suddenly stopped. Her body went still, her eyes fixed on the door as if she had heard something Emily couldn't. When Emily asked what was wrong, Sophia leaned closer and whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Whatever you hear after midnight, don't follow it." Emily frowned, confused, asking what she meant, but Sophia didn't answer immediately. Her grip tightened on the blanket before she finally said, "You'll understand, but when you do, it's already too late." Emily laughed it off, not because it was funny, but because it didn't make sense, because it couldn't be real. But Sophia didn't laugh back, and that silence lingered longer than the warning itself. Days passed, and nothing happened. No strange sounds, no midnight disturbances, no explanation for Sophia's fear. The routine became predictable. Wake up, pray, study, eat, pray again, sleep. The silence became normal, the stillness expected, and slowly Emily convinced herself that whatever had felt wrong was just her imagination struggling to adjust. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, she would wake up suddenly with a strange, heavy feeling pressing down on her chest, as if something had been watching her long before she opened her eyes. Not from the room, not from outside, but from somewhere she couldn't see. And each time, she forced herself to ignore it, to close her eyes and pretend it wasn't there. Until the night, everything changed.
It started with the cold, not the kind that comes from open windows or thin blankets, but something deeper, something that didn't belong inside a closed room. Her eyes opened slowly, and that's when she realized she was already sitting up. Her body had moved without her. The other girls were sitting too, all of them perfectly still, perfectly aligned, all staring at the door. And then the bell rang again. This time, there was no confusion, no denial. It wasn't just a sound, it was a call, and something inside her understood it before her mind could catch up. Her body began to move, rising from the bed, stepping toward the door along with the others, her thoughts screaming in silence as she realized the truth too late. This was what Sophia had meant. This was what no one talked about, and this was why, once you heard it, you didn't get to choose anymore. The moment Emily stepped out into the corridor, she understood something far more terrifying than the loss of control. She was not alone, and none of them were truly awake. The hallway stretched unnaturally long, far longer than it ever had during the day, with dim lights flickering in a slow, rhythmic pattern, as if the building itself was breathing. One by one, doors opened in perfect sequence, and from each room, girls stepped out silently, their movements synchronized, their faces blank, their eyes fixed forward. No one spoke, no one hesitated. It wasn't walking, it was obedience. Emily tried to resist, tried to stop her legs, tried to turn back, but her body ignored every command as if something deeper had already taken control of her. The air grew colder with every step, thick enough to feel like it was pressing against her lungs, and the shadows along the walls began to stretch in ways that didn't match the light, forming shapes that seemed to move just beyond her focus. She glanced at the girl beside her, and her breath caught. The girl's face looked wrong, not gone, but unfinished, slightly blurred as if it were slowly being erased. Her lips began to move, yet no sound came from her, and still a voice was there, surrounding them, existing without a source. By the time they reached the chapel, the doors were already open, waiting, as though something inside had been expecting them. A dim golden light spilled outward, but it carried no warmth. The candles inside burned with an unnatural stillness, their flames frozen as if time had stopped within those walls. Rows of students were already kneeling, perfectly aligned, heads bowed at identical angles, hands folded with mechanical precision. And before Emily could think, her own body dropped to its knees among them. Then she saw the nuns, and the sight froze whatever remained of her control. There were too many, far more than she had ever seen during the day, and they stood in a long, silent line at the front of the chapel, their black robes blending into the darkness behind them. At first, they appeared normal, but the longer she looked, the more reality seemed to distort. Some were taller than any human should be, their bodies stretched unnaturally. Others were impossibly thin, their forms bending in subtle, disturbing ways, and some had no faces at all, only hollow darkness where features should have been. One of them stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate, its pale face stretched tightly over its skull, its eyes completely black, absorbing everything around them. When it spoke, its lips didn't move, and the voice came from everywhere at once, pressing into Emily's mind rather than entering through her ears. "Welcome. Tonight you will pray." Her lips began to move before she could resist, words spilling out in a language she had never heard, yet somehow understood in a way that made her chest tighten with dread. It wasn't English, it wasn't Latin, it was something older, something that felt wrong the moment it existed. Around her, hundreds of voices joined together in perfect unison, forming a sound that was too controlled, too synchronized to belong to humans. The voices didn't echo, but layered, building heavier and deeper until it felt like the sound itself was alive. Emily tried to stop, tried to force her mouth shut, but the prayer continued through her as if she were nothing more than a vessel. The air shifted again, colder still, and the candlelight began to shrink, not flickering, not fading, but slowly being consumed by something unseen. The shadows thickened, stretching toward the center of the chapel, and beneath the voices she began to hear something else, a low, deep vibration, like something vast and ancient was listening. Her eyes shifted once more to the girl beside her, and this time her breath failed completely. The girl's face was gone, not hidden, not covered, but erased, replaced with smooth, pale skin where no features remained. And yet her body still knelt, her lips still moved, the voice still emerged, though there was no mouth left to speak. Panic surged through Emily, crashing against the invisible force controlling her, but it was useless. One by one, more students began to change, their faces fading, their features dissolving into blank emptiness, their identities disappearing as the prayer continued without interruption. At the front, the nun slowly tilted its head and smiled, a wide, unnatural stretch that felt wrong to witness. "Names are a burden," the voice whispered, echoing inside every mind at once. "Tonight, you are freed." Emily's thoughts began to blur, her memories slipping like water through her grasp, and even her own name started to feel distant, unfamiliar, as if it belonged to someone else. The prayer grew louder, faster, heavier, pressing down on her until it felt like she might collapse beneath it. And then suddenly, everything stopped. The candles went out all at once, plunging the chapel into complete darkness. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. Emily felt something in front of her, impossibly close, a presence that didn't feel human, cold, hollow, empty. A whisper brushed against her face, not heard, but felt. "Let me take your name." Terror screamed inside her mind as she tried to resist, tried to move, but her body remained still. Something touched her, not like a hand, not like skin, but like emptiness itself, and slowly she felt it begin to take something from her. Not her body, not her voice, but something deeper, something that made her who she was. Her thoughts fractured, her memories faded, her identity slipping away piece by piece, and just before everything disappeared, one final realization formed in the darkness. This was not a prayer. This was a collection. Part 3. They Take Your Name. When the darkness finally lifted, Emily was still kneeling, but something was wrong in a way she couldn't immediately understand. The chapel had returned to its normal appearance, candlelight steady, walls unmoving, the silence now almost peaceful as if nothing had ever happened. Students began to rise slowly, one by one, their movements calm, controlled, natural. Too natural. Emily's body followed, standing up without resistance this time, but her mind lagged behind, struggling to catch up with reality. Something was missing. Not physically. Her hands were still there, her breath still steady, her surroundings unchanged, but deeper than that, something inside her felt hollow, like a part of her had been carefully removed. She tried to think, to hold on to something familiar, but her thoughts felt thinner, slower, as if pieces of them had been erased. The other students began to walk out of the chapel, their footsteps soft, synchronized, yet no longer forced. They moved as if nothing unusual had occurred, as if midnight had simply been another routine. Emily turned her head, her eyes scanning the faces around her, and her chest tightened. Some of them looked normal, but others were wrong. Their expressions were blank in a way that went beyond emotion, their eyes empty in a way that reflected nothing at all. And some faces seemed slightly blurred, as if they hadn't fully returned. Emily tried to focus on one girl, tried to recognize her, but the harder she looked, the more her mind resisted, as though it couldn't process what it was seeing. A sudden thought struck her. Sophia. Emily spun around quickly, her heart pounding, searching through the moving crowd. She found her near the back, walking slowly toward the exit. Relief flooded through her, but it didn't last. Sophia's posture was the same, her steps steady, her face calm, but something was off. Emily rushed toward her and grabbed her arm. "Sophia," she whispered urgently, her voice shaking. "What just happened? What was that?" Sophia turned her head slowly, her movements delayed, almost mechanical, and for a brief second Emily felt hope, until she saw her eyes. They were empty. Not blank in expression, but empty in presence, like no one was looking out from behind them. Sophia tilted her head slightly, as if trying to understand the question, and then said in a soft, even tone, "There is nothing to be afraid of." Emily's grip tightened. "What do you mean? You told me not to follow it. You warned me." Her voice cracked as panic rose again, but Sophia simply stared at her, unblinking, and replied, "I did not say that." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. "Yes, you did," she insisted, her voice trembling. "You told me the first night. You said—" She stopped, because suddenly she couldn't remember. The memory slipped away as she reached for it. Sophia's face, her voice, that moment, gone. Emily staggered back slightly, her breath becoming uneven as she tried to piece it together, but it was like trying to hold on to water. It kept slipping through her mind. Sophia gently pulled her arm free, her expression unchanged, and walked away without another word, disappearing into the corridor as if nothing had ever connected them. Emily stood there frozen, her thoughts spiraling, a growing realization settling deep inside her chest. It wasn't just Sophia. Something had been taken, something real. The rest of the day passed like a dream she couldn't fully wake up from. Classes continued as usual. Teachers spoke in calm, measured tones. Students took notes, pages turned, pens moved, but everything felt distant, like she was observing it from far away. Emily tried to focus, tried to hold on to her thoughts, but they felt incomplete, as if parts of her mind were missing. When the teacher called attendance, something strange happened. Names were spoken, one by one, and each student responded, but some of the names felt unfamiliar, not new, not strange, just empty, as if they didn't belong to anyone. Emily found herself waiting, her heart beating faster, unsure of what she was waiting for, until... "Emily Carter?" Her body responded before she could think. "Present." The word left her mouth automatically, but for a split second, she didn't recognize the name. A cold wave passed through her. Was that her name? The thought lingered longer than it should have. Later, in the hallway, Emily passed by a large mirror mounted on the wall. She slowed down, her reflection catching her attention. At first, everything looked normal. Her face, her expression, her eyes. But something felt off. She stepped closer, staring at herself, trying to understand the discomfort building inside her. And then she saw it. Her reflection blinked. A second too late. Emily froze. Her breath stopped. She stared harder, waiting, watching, but now everything appeared normal again. Her reflection matched her perfectly, as if nothing had happened. She let out a slow breath, stepping back, trying to convince herself it was just her imagination, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. That night, she didn't sleep. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt it again. That presence, that emptiness, that thing that had touched her in the dark. Her thoughts kept circling the same terrifying question. What did they take? And worse, how much was already gone? Hours passed. Silence filled the room. The other girls slept peacefully. And then, ding! The bell rang again. This time, Emily didn't wait to be controlled. She sat up on her own, her heart racing, her breath shaking, because now she understood something far worse than fear. The first night, they had taken something from her. But the second night, They were coming for the rest. When the bell rang the second time, something inside Emily didn't break. It changed. The fear was still there, sharp and suffocating, but it no longer froze her in place. It made her aware, desperate, almost awake. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the door as the same unnatural silence filled the room. Around her, the other girls began to rise again in perfect synchronization, their movements identical to the night before, their faces calm, empty, detached from anything human. But Emily didn't move, not immediately. Something inside her resisted, weak but still alive, holding on to whatever part of her had not yet been taken. The bell rang again, closer now, heavier, and this time she felt it differently, not as a command, but as a pull from somewhere deep inside her, something trying to drag her forward from within. Her fingers tightened against the bed as she fought it, her thoughts blurring under the pressure, and she understood with growing certainty that she would not be able to resist forever. So instead of letting it take control, she made a choice. She stood up on her own. The corridor stretched before her, unchanged and yet completely different. The lights flickered in their slow rhythm, doors opened, and the girls walked silently toward the chapel, but now Emily could see more than before. The shadows didn't just shift, they watched. They stretched along the walls like thin, reaching hands, retreating only when she looked directly at them. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if the building itself was aware of her defiance. She moved carefully, pretending to follow the others, while her eyes searched for something that didn't belong. And then she saw it. A door, slightly open. A door that had never been there before. None of the others reacted. They walked past it as if it didn't exist. But Emily stopped for just a second, her heart pounding as she glanced toward the chapel and then back at the dark opening. Every instinct warned her not to break the pattern, but something deeper told her this was the first real choice she had been given. Slowly, quietly, she stepped inside. The door closed behind her without a sound, and darkness wrapped around her instantly, thicker and colder than anywhere else in the school. The air smelled of damp stone and something faintly metallic, something that didn't belong in a place meant for prayer. As her eyes adjusted, she saw the stairs leading downward, disappearing into blackness beneath the school. Each step creaked softly as she descended, the sound echoing in a way that felt too loud, too exposed. The deeper she went, the colder it became, until her breath turned visible in the air. The walls changed as she moved lower, from painted surfaces to rough, ancient stone, older than the building above, marked with deep carvings that didn't resemble any language she knew. They looked scratched rather than written, uneven and desperate, as if something had carved them in warning or in fear. At the bottom, the stairs opened into a vast underground chamber, and for a moment, Emily couldn't understand what she was seeing. It wasn't a basement, it was a chapel, but older, darker, hidden beneath everything above it. Dim candles lined the walls, their weak light barely illuminating the space, and in the center stood a large stone structure, worn and scarred by time. But what truly froze her in place were the markings that covered everything around her. Names. Thousands of them, carved into the floor, the walls, the stone itself. Some were deep and clear, as if they had been placed there permanently, while others were faint, nearly erased, fading into nothing. And some were incomplete, as if they had been taken before they could fully exist. Emily stepped forward slowly, her breath unsteady, her eyes scanning the endless names, each one carrying a weight she could feel but not fully understand. When her fingers brushed against one of them, something surged through her mind. Images, voices, fragments of memories that were not her own. A girl laughing, sunlight in a classroom, a voice calling out, and then suddenly, nothing. It was gone, completely erased. Emily pulled her hand back sharply, her heart racing as she stumbled backward, her voice trembling as she whispered, "What is this?" The answer came from behind her. Memory. She turned instantly, her body tensing as she saw one of the nuns standing at the top of the stairs. But now the illusion was gone. Up close, it didn't look human at all. Its form shifted subtly as if it couldn't hold its shape, its face flickering between something familiar and something unrecognizable, its black eyes absorbing everything around them. were not meant to come here," it said, its voice echoing unnaturally through the chamber. Emily's fear rose again, but she didn't step back this time. "What is this place?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "What are you doing to us?" The figure tilted its head slowly, and then it smiled, a wide, unnatural expression that felt wrong to witness. "This is where we keep what you leave behind," it said softly. Emily's stomach dropped. "We do not take," it continued. "You give." Her mind struggled to process the words, to reject them. "No," she whispered, "you're forcing us." The figure began to move toward her, its steps slow and uneven, its form stretching slightly as it descended. "You came when you heard the bell," it said. Another step. "You spoke the words." Another step. "You let go." It stopped just in front of her, its presence cold and hollow. "And each time you return," it whispered, "you become lighter." Emily felt her thoughts flicker again, her memories slipping at the edges, and with a voice barely strong enough to exist, she asked, "What happens when there's nothing left?" The figure's smile widened, deeper, more unnatural. "Then you stay." Above them, the bell rang again, louder than before, closer than ever, and for the first time Emily understood the truth that had been hidden beneath everything. The chapel above was never the real place. It was only the beginning. The Midnight Prayer, Part 5, The One Who Stayed. The moment the bell rang again, the sound didn't just echo, it tore through Emily's thoughts like something breaking open inside her. It was louder now, closer, no longer distant or calling, but claiming. The air in the underground chamber shifted violently, the weak candle flames bending inward as if something unseen had entered the space. Emily stumbled back, her heart pounding uncontrollably, her mind racing between panic and clarity, because now she understood something she hadn't before. There was no escape by running. The only way out was to hold on to what little of herself remained. The figure in front of her didn't move quickly, didn't chase her, didn't need to. Its presence alone was enough. "You should not resist," it said softly, its voice pressing into her mind rather than reaching her ears. "You are almost empty already." The words hit deeper than fear, because part of her knew they were true. Her thoughts felt thinner, her memories unstable, her sense of self slipping like something she could no longer fully hold. She tried to focus, tried to remember something real, her home, her parents, her name, but each memory felt distant, fading at the edges as if something had already taken pieces of them away. "No," she whispered, shaking her head as she stepped back, her voice trembling but still her own. "I'm still here." The figure tilted its head slightly, studying her, almost curious. "For now," it replied. Above them, the bell rang again, and this time, her body reacted. The pull returned stronger than before, no longer something she could resist by standing still. It dragged at her from within, pulling her toward the stairs, toward the chapel above, toward the ritual she now understood too late. Emily turned and ran. Her footsteps echoed violently through the chamber as she rushed toward the staircase, her breath sharp and uneven, her thoughts collapsing into one desperate instinct: escape. The walls seemed to close in as she climbed, the carved names around her almost vibrating, as if they were alive, as if they were watching her leave. When she reached the top, the corridor was no longer the same. It was darker, longer, endless. The doors were gone. The walls stretched into shadow, and at the far end, the chapel waited. But now she could see it clearly. It wasn't a place of prayer. It was a mouth, open, waiting, and inside, the students were already kneeling again. Emily slowed, her breath shaking as she stared at them. This time there was no illusion left. Their bodies were there, but their faces, many of them were completely gone, replaced by smooth, pale emptiness. Others flickered like unstable images, their features struggling to remain. And the nuns? No, not nuns. They stood taller now, their forms no longer fully human, their shapes bending and stretching like shadows trying to imitate something they didn't fully understand. Their faces shifted constantly, forming and dissolving, never settling into anything real. One of them turned toward her. "You came back." Emily's chest tightened. "I didn't choose this," she said, her voice breaking. "You're doing this to us." The figure stepped closer. "You still believe you are separate," it said softly. Another step. "But listen carefully." It leaned closer, its voice dropping into something deeper, older. "We do not take your identity." A pause. "You release it." The words hit her harder than anything before, not because they were loud, but because something inside her responded to them. Memories flashed through her mind, moments during the prayer, moments where she had stopped fighting, where she had let go, where the fear had turned into surrender. She stumbled back slightly, shaking her head as if trying to physically reject the realization. "No, that's not true," she whispered, but her voice lacked certainty. The figure didn't argue. It simply waited. And then, the bell rang again. This time, Emily dropped to her knees. Not because she was forced, but because she couldn't hold on anymore. Her thoughts fractured, slipping faster than she could catch them, her memories breaking apart into fragments she couldn't piece together. The prayer began again, rising around her, inside her, through her, and this time she didn't fight it. Not because she wanted to, but because she no longer knew how. Her lips moved, the words flowing out of her in that same ancient language, and with each word, something inside her loosened, detached, disappeared. Her name. It felt distant, unimportant, gone. The darkness didn't come suddenly this time. It came slowly, gently, like something welcoming her. And then, silence. Morning arrived quietly, as if nothing had ever happened. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, filling the halls with soft warmth. Students moving calmly from one class to another, their voices low, their expressions peaceful. Everything looked normal. Everything felt normal. Except for one thing. There was a new student sitting in the classroom. She sat perfectly still, her posture straight, her hands resting neatly on her desk. When the teacher called attendance, the name was spoken clearly, calmly, like it had always been there. Emily Carter. She looked up. Present. Her voice was soft, even, perfect. But when the girl sitting beside her turned and asked quietly, "Are you new here?" Emily paused, just for a second, and then she smiled. "I've always been here." The bell rang again. And this time, no one noticed.